Welcome to our live after 5. I'd like to share a couple of conversations I had with two people this week who are looking to buy a property for their retirement and for their future pension. So I was giving them some tips and some things that I would avoid if I was looking to buy a property for my pension, one that you would rent out, and things that I would look out for. So first things first, if you're looking at buying a property as an investment for a pension or for your retirement, you need to establish if this property was rented out before. Now, the property, if it was rented out before, it would have been or should be registered with the RTB, that's the Residential Tenancy Board, and what was the last rent. Because right now, you can't actually increase the rent, and that would mean that that is the rent that is carried forward. And in future times, you'll be able to increase it by 2%. And 2% is quite a small sum. So we have seen two clients who came to us who had rented the property out previously. They'd been looking after it themselves. They had very nice tenants. One lady who's had a tenant in situ for 9 years, and the rent is €500. So if an investor was looking at a property like that, it would make no sense, because the forward on rent that they would charge would be €500. And let's face it, that would not be economically viable to spend, let's say, 200,000 on a property and receive a rental income of 500 per month. It just wouldn't, the figures would not add up. So the first thing is, what was the property rented previously and what was the last rent? The next thing is, I like to know, well, is there, how many apartments are in the building or the block, if it's an apartment? If it's a house, what's the estate like? For a second, if it's an apartment, is there any lifts? I'm always cautious about lifts because when they break down, they're really expensive. What are the service charges in the building? Is the building well run? Okay, how do you know that? Well, you would ask about the management accounts and the management company to provide some information around that. And if the financial situation is bleak in the management company, then I would strongly advise you not to buy a property in a building such as, and that is because you're really going to inherit major issues. So whilst you can buy a property with a lift in the building, just be careful that the lift or multiple lifts don't continuously break down. Is there a sinking fund? This is like a savings account. And how much is in the sinking fund? There is a requirement by law to have a sinking fund within a management company, and what is the financial health of that sinking fund? Then, needless to say, what are the tenants like in the building? How's it being kept? How's it being maintained? If it's a house on its own, then again, was it rented out? Was it registered with the RTB? If it was lived in and not rented before, lived in by a family, then that means you can apply market rent to the property. And a good market rent and a reasonable rent as well, while strong, one that will attract good tenants and not be ridiculously overpriced, whereby it's higher than any mortgage that someone would pay. Because if you go crazy on the rent charge, then needless to say, the tenants are not going to be able to pay that rent for much longer. And obviously, when renting it out, you have to make sure that the tenants can afford that rent. So there's lots of different nuances when looking for a property. Somebody said, well, I'd like to buy a rental property that I would live in myself. That doesn't really make sense. Why would you have to buy a rental property that you would live in yourself? Because you're not going to be living in it. It's an investment property. And there's lots of different properties in different locations that may suit you and may not. Needless to say, the likes of Dunmore East, Dungarvan and Tramore are difficult places to buy an investment property because there is such a big demand for homes, and it's a very competitive market. Like in Dungarvan right now, there are only 19 properties, so it'd be a very difficult market to enter. It just wouldn't make sense to buy an investment property at, I suppose, the prices of homes in Dungarvan right now. I don't think the figures would stack up. We are more than happy to give advice, whether you're buying an investment property through Liberty Blue or indeed from any other agency. I guess we've been on the road a long time with rental properties, and in 27 years we have learned a lot. And an important consideration is the location. Will it rent easy? We'll be able to attract nice tenants, look after the property. What was the last rent if it was rented before? What would the market rent if it wasn't rented before? Does the property need extensive work? How much work? And do you have the time and the appetite to invest? And if a property is advertised and it looks cheap, well, sometimes they say if it's too good to be true, sometimes it is. We're here to help, and I hope you all have a lovely weekend. And as I always say, slán go fóill, and thank you so much for watching.